Shalom uvracha miYerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. We are privileged this evening to study together the Haftarah, the special prophetic reading associated with Parashat Beshalach. The reading of the Haftarah this week is taken from the book of Judges, Sefer Shofatim. And although there are communities that only read chapter 5 of Judges as the Haftarah of Beshalach, chapter 5 is the famous song of Deborah, Shirat Devorah. The Ashkenazi custom in most communities is to read both chapters 4 and 5 of the book of Judges. It is one of the longest and perhaps the longest of all the Haftarot that are ever read during the year on Shabbat morning. And it is surely worthwhile to study the myriads of messages connected to these crucial chapters of Tanakh. Our focus this evening will be on one aspect of the story described in chapter 4 and then reviewed in a poetic form in chapter 5. Sisera, the leading general of King Yavin, is the head of a fierce battle. He wages a fierce battle against our nation, as is described in the Haftarah in chapter 4. Sisera was such a warrior, he was such a military expert, that he is described in the Haftarah, if you're interested in chapter 4, verse 13, as leading his army with 900 iron chariots. 900 iron chariots, the strongest perhaps form of weaponry at the time. God had already sent the prophetic message to Barak through Devorah that it was Barak who would be able to overcome Sisera through special divine assistance. And indeed, the enemy is completely bewildered and confounded by God. All the chariots seem to be neutralized by Barak, and the leading general of the enemy camp, Sisera, is fleeing on foot, fleeing and running for his life. Where does he go? Chapter 4, verse 17. V'Sisera nas biraglav el ohel Yael eshet hever hakeni. Sisera fled to the tent of Yael, the wife of Hever, the Canaanite. He feels comfortable in the tent of Yael, wife of Hever HaKeni. And it is Yael, who ultimately kills Sisera, as is described, both in chapter 4 and in chapter 5. Yael kills the leading general, which marks the decisive factor in the battle. Why is it that Sisera felt comfortable in the tent of Yael? The text itself speaks along the lines of Ki Shalom bein Yavin melech Hatzor uvein beit Hever HaKeni. There was some type of peaceful relationship between King Yavin, Sisera was Yavin's general, between King Yavin and the home of Hever the Canaanite. Who exactly was this Hever HaKeni, husband of Yael? Our rabbis teach that he was a descendant of Jethro, a grandson of Yithro. One of Yithro's names is Cani. Jethro's family. Yithro is the father-in-law of Moshe. Jethro's family had converted to Judaism, and this particular person, mentioned several times in our Haftarah, Hever the Keni was one of the descendants of Jethro. The Midrash teaches that Yithro had 7 names. I often say that he had 7 daughters and he had 7 names, because each child brings out a new name, perhaps, in a parent. Jethro had 7 names. One of the names of Jethro, one of the names of Yithro was Keni. According to Midrashic teaching, why Keni? For Yithro had acquired heaven, earth, and Torah. The Sifrei teaches, Keni, Shekana, Shamayim Va'aretz. The name of this particular family member of the descendants of Jethro was Hever HaKeni. Interestingly enough, Hever also is one of the 7 names of Yithro. Called Hever, from the word Chaver, meaning some form of close association, some form of becoming a comrade. In the language of the Mechilta in Parashat the Mechilta in Parashat Yithro, Hever Shenasa Kechaver Lamakom. He had become a friend of God, so to speak. In any case, 200 or so years after Yithro, his grandchildren's home is the one that is open to people fleeing in trouble. Jethro's home was open to Moses. Moshe, as you remember, was trying to escape. He was a running fugitive, trying to escape the wrath of Pharaoh and the death threats of Paro. His grandson, Hever, had a similar type of home. Yithro excelled in hospitality to fugitives, and so did his grandchildren. As Harav Yitzchak Levi writes in his commentary to Shofatim, the name of the book, if you're interested, is Parshiot B'Sifrei HaNevi'im. He writes as follows: Ahalo shel Hever HaKeni, this special tent of Hever the Kenite, Haya Yadua B'Achnasat Nirdafim. Anyone who needed the place was running away with Borachim. Anybody escaping would come to the house of Hever HaKeni. U'b'schut mitzvah zo, and since they were so involved in this mitzvah of opening their home to people in need, zimna lam liyael ha'hashkacha ligmo chesed liYisrael kulo. Through Yael, ultimately, the entire Jewish people benefited. This indeed is the very teaching in the Midrash. If you're interested, Midrash Shmot Rabbah, chapter 4, paragraph 2. Mikan atalamed, mi shekibel al atzmo la'asot mitzvah, ein otah mitzvah poseket mibeto. When someone begins in his home or in her home, when someone begins in his or her family a certain level of religious fulfillment of a positive commandment, it stays in the family. There is some kind of continuity to that mitzvah. And the Midrash speaks about the mitzvah of Yithro and the continuity in Hever HaKeni. Mitzvato shel Yithro shekibel b'toch beito goel shebarach b'pnei hasonei. In the house of Jethro, he took the Redeemer of Israel, who was trying to run away from the enemy of Israel. And later on, Amad mi beito, of his grandchildren, it was the opposite. Kibel l'sonei, he took into his tent, to his home, the enemy who was running away from the Redeemer of Israel, from Barak. Each person's good deeds are somehow spiritually transmitted. They're transmitted to our children, to our grandchildren, to our great-grandchildren. These spiritual genes often mold the Torah true personality and can have an everlasting impact. Mitzvah goreret mitzvah. One mitzvah leads to another. The mitzvah pattern of the early generations brings with it future good deeds in ways beyond our comprehension. Yael and Hever HaKeni. These are the people who are benefiting and continuing the noble actions of their grandfather Yithro. Keni, grandfather Yithro. and are thereby, in some level, continuing his ways and teaching it to future generations. May we all merit patterns of positive Torah behavior, positive Torah actions, and may these pathways of righteousness stay with us and with our descendants forever and ever, in the spirit of what we learn.
Amen.
Amen.